Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another Monday Morning Art Talk. Whippy! All right, so today I'm excited. I was hanging out with my good friend Wade Wazinski here. It's his birthday on St. Patrick's Day. There's even got the little four-leaf clover there. And what I wanted, he works for Disney. He's been there for years. I first met Wade back on Clerks, the animated series. He's the one who took my portfolio and showed it to the director, Chris Bailey, and Chris Bailey hired me. It was all about connections. I knew this guy, AJ, he knew Wade, he introduced him, and that's how it all started with the connections, and he's been in the industry for a long time at Disney. For how many years have you been at Disney for now?
19 years in the industry, 12 at Disney.
12 at Disney. So Wade's been there a long time and always on the other side. So Wade's not an artist. Wade is the guy who makes the shows run. He's responsible for organizing the artists, is responsible for hiring artists, for everyone. He's responsible for making things all come together. And what I wanted to do today was just kind of have a conversation and just discuss things that you see in the industry, what you're looking for, what you've experienced, and but yeah, Wade and I go way back, Kim Possible, and many other things. Like right now, so you're at Disney and you're running a show there.
Yeah, so I've been a line producer since 2000 well, technically, I've been running a production since 2004. Different titles, same job. Yeah. So we were having a little conversation at dinner tonight about what we look for when we're hiring people, and I mentioned to him that I barely pay any attention to the resume, which turned out to be sort of half truth, give or take our conversation. But what I was really trying to emphasize is that where you went to school, what you did in school, doesn't affect my decisions or set too much of a precedent out of the gate as much as one might think. Now, that's not to just tell everyone don't go to school.
Right.
But what I'm saying is if you had an English degree or a film degree or you're, a doctor or something,
yeah,
it kind of doesn't matter as much when you're applying for a job in production animation or how you're perceived as an artist in animation, because your portfolio would supersede your resume, for example. But let's say you're talking about a production position.
Yeah.
It's not as important to me that you did really well in French history as it would be that you're a personable, likable person in an interview.
And that's the thing that we were sort of getting to, is just the personality, being personable. I think that's one of the main things, that every time we're meeting people, all the time we see people, like we can, like Robin, your wife, was talking about just going to a store and not being greeted by people, just people not paying attention, people not being just personable. And I think having that conversation, they're like very nervous or they're just not talking, and you're going to base hiring people on whether, like you were mentioning, you got to work with them 40 hours
for
a week.
sure, and you can't be checked out, because it's it's sort of a younger person's thing to not be so comfortable in public speaking. Sure. Or in meeting environments or interviews, and no one really is. But I think I've noticed, I have a sister who's 13 years younger than me. The first time I noticed it was with her age group, and I was probably in my 20s, and she was, like a teenager or whatever. And then proportionally,
right.
But her friends always seemed very monosyllabic and sort of checked out. She, in fact, wasn't, but her friends tended to be that way. And I was like, wow, that was really weird. Like they don't answer questions when you ask them, or they give you one-word answers, and it's like a bad TV interview. And when I started interviewing people, now that I'm a little older, that were 20 years younger than me, I started to really see almost what felt like a generational disconnect with casual conversation.
Right. Just they couldn't have it. They couldn't.
It was weird, and or you'd meet the children of the people you worked with. And
right.
They would come to an animation studio to spend the afternoon and meet everybody, and some of them were non-responsive.
Right,
And it's a
right.
very interesting thing, but
Yeah.
it's okay if you're just hanging out.
Yeah.
But if you're there for an interview or you're trying to get a job there or you're meeting someone. I recently had a group of art students that came by to visit all the way from New
This
York.
was crazy. This was crazy.
Well, I'm not going to name names.
Yeah, no, we're not
'cause it's
naming
super
names. We're not
recent,
going to
but-
name the school, but you had a bunch of students come out.
Yeah, and the initial response to a planned visit to a major animation studio was like a bunch of dead fish out of the gate. Now, eventually they warmed up, and it was a really good experience, I think, for both parties, but the limited amount of enthusiasm was really shocking to
Just
me.
no questions when they ask, who has questions, just not even being prepared and having questions. And I think it's just so important, just whenever you're going to go to a studio, whenever you're going to meet people, whenever you're going to get have that opportunity, the thing that you got to practice is just communicating with people.
And just be friendly and enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And then you're being yourself. And
Yeah.
it makes such a big difference because that we were talking about if you have 3 qualified candidates, and generally speaking, let's talk about a character designer, for example. You have 20 portfolios that you look at, and of the 20, you pick your top 3.
Yeah.
And like, now we're seriously considering hiring this person. Let's actually call them in for a meeting.
Yeah.
So you'll actually set up a meeting with these 3 individuals, and they'll come to meet the producers. Well, no matter how good or bad they are, there's going to be kind of a ranking of 1, 2, 3 as to how they react to them. So imagine person in the 3rd slot didn't make eye contact, didn't ask follow-up questions, wasn't amiable, engaging, all these things.
Yeah.
And then the 2nd and 1st person really were. Well,
Right.
it's going to be a tough decision. Or maybe only the 1st person was. But that could cost you a job or be the thing that gets you a job.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not anything special. It's not even a trait or a skill. It's just something I think to be conscious of that everyone has in them.
Yeah.
That when you're hanging out with your friend and you have a good conversation, or like we said on a first date, like a good first date, you can't stop talking, you can't stop engaging.
Yeah.
That's a good meeting too.
Yeah.
And
I almost think the thing is, if you're maybe not that type of person that can go into and just sort of like shoot the shit, so to speak, and go off, that at least you have prepared yourself with questions, or maybe done enough research even about the person you're going to go meet, or the show, or anything you can. Do some research, just development, just so that you can go to the meeting and just be like, so... I saw that you got started at Disney back in 2004 and you worked on Kim Possible. What was that like?
Yeah.
That you have something when if it gets to that sort of silence and that lull, that you're prepared, that you're not going in just like, I don't know who you are, what you do.
Well, you just inspired me. There's a couple tricks you can do. So one thing is people love to talk about themselves. So
Yes.
if you're interviewing someone or meeting with somebody who's established, go on their IMDb page and look up what they did.
IMDb. IMDb.
But you literally can just look at the last 3 shows that they worked on and go, oh, that was cool, or I knew that guy that worked on this show, and just have it chambered in your head, because inevitably at the end of every interview, someone will say, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
And no matter what it is, if you were to return a response, just to engage the person you're talking to and ask them a question about themselves, or maybe you have a real question about how you would fit in this environment that would help you define yourself in that ways, and even if you're not comfortable with it, just have a couple in your back pocket.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's almost having that back pocket thing, just to be able to, if it gets there and there's a little awkwardness. But you're right, it's always like, if you are informed and come in and you're open, it's going to make things easier. Hopefully, the person, you're a pretty personable guy, but I'm sure there's probably line producers and different people out there who probably aren't as personable.
Yeah, or they learn like the 10 questions to ask in a good interview, and it's the same question. Then they end their interview with saying, so what are your weaknesses?
Right, yeah.
That's a bullshit question. So
Right.
to be honest, when I have a good interview, it becomes a conversation.
Yeah.
And I want to spend time with that person. If I'm going to work with somebody, I'm going to spend at the minimum 18 months with them.
Right.
And it's got to be somebody I'm going to be in the same square footage. I see them more than my wife and child.
Right.
I want them to be people
Yeah.
I want to be around. And it doesn't mean we have to have the same taste in movies or the same taste in ice cream, but I have to at least connect with them on a human level.
Yeah, and it's got to happen quick. And I think we know when we're in conversation with people and we meet people that, hey, I kind of like that. You can leave after one night of meeting someone for the first time and go, oh, I like that guy.
Exactly.
It was cool.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh man, that was just like pulling teeth. You don't be like that. If you're just kind of saying, man, that was pulling teeth, that was just brutal, there was no connection. Again, you feel it pretty quickly. And so sometimes maybe it's just not right. say if the person's going in for the job, maybe it's just not the right timing, not the right show, not the right.
Yeah, and I would rather someone who's interviewing at different places find that they're not the right fit because the person interviewing them doesn't blow their socks off than the other way around. Because, especially if you're in a creative environment, there's so much competition out there, and there's so many people, so many talented people doing virtually the same job, and now it's worldwide. Like, you're not even limited by geographic proximity anymore. You just have to connect, because I think everyone has a skill set now that is way above.
Way above.
Used to.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
The resources are there. It's easy to become knowledgeable. It's just to apply that little extra something.
Right.
And I think that's the connection.
Connection.
Yeah. And if you just kind of make a friend.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the reality. It's like how I got my job first on Clerks was through a friend. I mean, the reality is that most jobs that you end up getting are through friends and the connections that you make, the people that you meet, and it's just, and then the cycle. And I mean, there's some people that have kids who grow up in art and animation, and then they want to get involved in animation, and because they're connected, they can say, hey, my kid kind of can you talk to my kid, so there's even things that happen like that all the time.
Yeah, and it's just like any relationship, people that you want to be friends with, people that you want to spend time with, people that you want to connect with. And it's really the difference between the person you meet and the other person you meet. And it's that one little thing, like, this guy draws very well and this woman draws really well, but she was really pretty funny, and I liked her, and she was like, she made that comment about college basketball. We really connected because she saw my mug and she liked this and blah blah blah. Or she hated my team and she made fun of them right in front of me. That took a lot of guts, and I thought that was pretty cool. Whatever. I mean, it just personal connections and things like that. And I would think if you're not comfortable with it, fake it for a while, until you at least get
maybe join like a Toastmasters, do something where you got to be out and you're forced to do it, like get out in front of people. I just kind of want to switch gears a bit and just ask you, like, what do you see when people, like, what's a common thing why you wouldn't hire someone based on their portfolio?
On their portfolio, I think in some cases probably the simplest answer is the work doesn't represent what it is we're doing. So if you're doing an action adventure show and it's all full of classic cartoon characters, it's great, but it kind of doesn't show this. So if you're trying to draw Spider-Man and all you have are talking animals, I think most people, especially if you're looking at a bunch of portfolios, it's like a quick elimination. So I think what would be helpful is that you try to focus the work that you're applying for to represent the work that you're representing. I said it wrong. The work that you're, the job you're trying to get, put the work in your portfolio that represents that job. If you don't have a one-to-one match, try to get as close as possible, or at the very least show diversity. If you have nothing but life drawings and the one cartoon show you worked on, maybe that's all you have, but maybe do some fan art and do some spec stuff. Or
show a different style of that fan art, so to speak.
And there's nothing wrong with drawing Batman a bunch of times if you're applying for a Batman job, or if you're going for a funny animal show and you haven't done it yet. Do a couple character sheets of funny animals, because that's what they're going to want to see. The landscape now is more about testing than it is about your overall work, and I find that most creative showrunners are like pretty comfortable testing just about anybody. They may want to see your portfolio first to get you to be eligible for a test, but I think open season testing is pretty
to a lot. So anyone can sort of test if they want. Just take a stab at it.
And because of that, you will get the character designs from the show that you're going to be working on. And they will give you maybe a description or a rough or something to lead you to the path. But what you end up handing in is as if you're working on the show already. So, in a sense, your portfolio is slightly less important in that scenario.
You just got to show that you can do the job that's required and show that it's in that fashion. Like, you understand the production aspect.
Assuming your portfolio is going to get you into the testing phase, again, I would keep it diverse or structure it toward the type of project you're looking to do. So, and then testing has some interesting pros and cons in the industry too. Like, people don't like to work for free. We try to keep testing as limited as possible. There are union restrictions on it.
Thank God.
The studios are aware that this is like a big ask for most. Like, so you're not alone in this, like, any thought about it. But it's probably the most accurate way for a creative person to assess someone's work
Yeah.
in the actual environment. That
I
they're
mean,
in.
my feeling about that is just test reasonably. Don't
Right.
overdo it. You know, it's like, you know, from like one drawing, really, you don't need to do 3 turnarounds. I see some tests where it's asking for 2, 3 turnarounds. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you're concerned about a turnaround, and a lot of people have trouble doing turnarounds, so I totally get that. But just ask for 1. Don't ask for 2. Don't ask for 3. That to me is like, come on.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people, and I've worked at multiple studios where this was heavily discussed. So it is a known thing. So we're doing our best to try to keep it reasonable.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for storyboard tests.
Oh, I'm
for
glad
writing
that
tests,
people
for
are
drawing
aware.
tests.
I'm glad that inside the studios they're aware, you know, because
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
that's very important. What's the toughest thing? What's the hardest artist that you usually have trouble finding? Like,
You know, I don't know that any one is any more or less difficult. I think probably character designer might be the most like personal to the show, the most identifiable.
right.
It's probably the least flexible as to the style itself.
Right.
Whereas a prop, no offense to prop designers, but generally speaking, it's the most universally
You can adapt.
structural
right.
and
right.
visual part of a show. Backgrounds are probably second in the fact that unless you're doing something super stylized,
Right.
they're usually universally understandable. Their
Yeah.
environments, they physically exist, as do props. But because characters are so, it's the genetic makeup
Right.
of the style.
So
of
you
the
guys
show.
hire the character designers first. You want that established first before you bring on the prop guys, the
Usually.
background guys, and everyone else.
Yeah, and it seems to put some sort of magical emphasis on the character designer that they would be more or less talented when it's not really the case.
Right, sure.
But it is sort of like the language of
yeah,
the show,
right. You're
how
making
it's spoken.
that's it. You're right. You're sort of like forming the
Yeah.
language. on
Yeah,
it.
so
yeah.
and a lot of things would build around the characters in most cases, because obviously if you pick like a traditional anime style
Right.
character, it might really influence how the whole show
Yeah.
looks, or a traditional Looney Tunes style thing might just find that it's cartoony. For
Yeah.
example, if it's Batman, it might be really structural and
Right,
architectural
right.
because it's a comic book. There's no rules though. There's
Yeah.
exceptions to every one of these things, like
Yeah.
I said. But I think the character designer is probably the most identifiable as far as the style. So that would be, to answer your
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
the most.
Now, do you feel that the productions have just been pushed back, like sped up a lot nowadays? Do you feel like there's in our conversation we were talking about, it seems like there's so much content right now, like everyone, like Disney is on fire right now, and everyone's on fire. You know, there's so much demand all the time for content, and you're seeing that all the time.
Yeah, and they have shrunk a little bit.
Yeah.
But probably not so much in the last 10 or 15 years. Probably if you go 25, 30 years back. I mean, the typical show, you get 2 weeks for design. On a 22-minute, you get 1 week for
2 weeks
11
design across the board for props, character design, backgrounds, about 2 weeks to design. And then how many characters roughly, like, or how many, what's expected? What's an average show? How many backgrounds, props, or characters on? I guess they're always different.
Yeah,
but,
it varies a little bit,
yeah.
but I would not be shocked if you literally had to do enough character designs that would equate to about 5 a day.
5 every single day.
And that, would
Yeah.
attribute somewhere around 50 per show,
Right.
which is 2 weeks.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if you had 3 character designers on a show,
Right.
there'd be less drawings, or if there's 1, they're going to be busy.
Right, sure. Yeah.
And backgrounds, anywhere from 25 to 75, depending on the angles and the dynamics of the
Right.
show. Props, they run from probably no less than 40 to 150.
Right, they probably have the most.
Yeah,
Like prop
yeah.
designers have the most amount of
Right.
work.
And their pros and cons are that props can be super complex, like you're designing a time machine,
Right.
or it's a pencil.
Right.
So the
right,
balance
right,
for them
right.
hopefully is they got lots of pencils and
Yeah.
paper and school materials, and then
One minute
time
you can
machine.
design it in 10 minutes,
Yeah.
the next is going to take you 2 days to do
Yeah.
it for
So
the one thing.
we generally
Yeah.
try to prioritize things, like for the storyboard artist, we try to prioritize things that don't exist in the world, that no human could imagine.
Right.
What is, like in the script
Right.
it says time machine. Well, that
Yeah.
could be anything.
Yeah.
So we try to deal with that first, but then if it says, Spider-Man picks up a pencil, you can figure out what a pencil is. So we could put that off to last. And,
Yeah.
and in some cases, even the overseas studios might figure out what a pencil looks like. So
Right, sure.
But quantity is a big part of it. The staffing is expensive. You know, the majority of the money that's spent is in the salaries.
Right.
So if you have a budget and you have this many shows in this many weeks, you can have a certain amount of people in a certain amount of time based on their salary. And if you have 2 people, it costs this much. But if you have 3 people, that's suddenly 33% more.
Right. And you're always given a budget in the beginning of every show you're about to do. This is your budget, and do they give you a time limit? Do they say you have 6 months to create this? Or?
Well, let's say I had Steven Silver on my show, and I knew without a doubt he can draw 100 characters a week.
Woohoo!
So I could do one of 2 things. I could hire one person to do things in twice as much time as 2 people.
Right.
Or I could give you the same amount of time and pay you twice as much.
Right.
Or you hire 2 people and you split the number in half.
Right.
Or you hire 3 people and split it into thirds.
Right.
It depends on if the time frame is your deadline, which is usually the case, because if you have a show that needs to air, it has to deliver in a certain time, so you figure out everything going back to we have to start here to get to here. Or in the case of you're making a movie, most of the time it has to be really good. Yeah. So we take 5 years to make it.
Sure.
You know, or maybe we push the release date another year because it's not quite good yet.
Right.
But for television, usually it's And one of the things that's interesting now is because of streaming, you'll probably have to create 20 shows and be finished with them before they even go out because they get
because the binge watching.
They dump 10 or 12 at a time or 20 at a time.
Which we had that conversation before just about the fact that where people never used to binge watch, and they, like you do. I remember when Fairly Odd Parents came out, they just did 6 shows and they kept rerunning those throughout the year. Only 6 shows, but it's like it was normal. Now people have a heart attack if there were only 6 shows. You got to do 20 so I can put them all out at once. But that's why you guys, even though you're doing that, you've still lowered the schedule. Like the schedule still gets.
It does. Well, because if you look at a show from probably the early to mid '90s, it was. I'm just going to throw a number, but it was probably 15% higher budget, 15% higher schedule, all because time and money translates. I don't know that was like we're getting cheaper. I just think it's just sort of like the opposite of inflation. It's like the budget kind of stays the same. The creative expectations keep getting higher. Salaries go up. So in order to compensate for that, it kind of gets a little squished together. One of the other tricks that works in the world is that you kind of don't give an unlimited amount of money to a bunch of creative people.
Sure, right. That's for sure. That's So if
you have $1 million to spend, you might give them $750,000 to start. See how that goes.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have what's called a contingency. And the contingency's there in case maybe everything's wonderful and there's a tsunami. Or 9/11 happens or whatever. Or they're making horrible decisions and you could pad whatever might be over budget by going into that little money you set aside. It's kind of smart business. It's a little trick. Call it insurance, if you will. Or
no, but like you were saying, I mean, you can't have an open-ended budget, especially with creative people, because they'll keep going and going and going and going, and it'll never end. But I think as as a character designer, you always kind of want that. As anyone working with a director, working with a client, someone who can say enough's enough, stop. Don't go any further, because otherwise you do. When do I stop? At what point do I stop working on this piece of artwork and say that it's finished? Usually someone else will say that for you, and it's a good thing.
Or maybe it's never finished. But we're done.
Right.
There's plenty
we got to move on.
It's just the reality. Plus, do you really want to draw something the 150th time, or would you rather draw something new?
No.
But
Well, listen. I mean, this has been awesome conversation. I guess I just kind of want to end it with maybe if you could just, is there any sort of additional advice that we didn't sort of mention that you would mention to anyone who's looking to get into the animation industry, whether they want to get in on the production side or they want to get in the art world part of it? What would you sort of tell someone? Just think about, look for, do.
I think one of the things is it is sort of a gift, because it's not always the most glamorous job in the world, but you do get to work with really talented and people that you want to spend time with, people you can talk about the things that you're interested in and learn from them, and get movie recommendations and learn from each other about how to help your craft, or in production, like maybe ways to do things more efficiently and effectively. And it's not coal mining. Like, you're usually in a really nice air-conditioned office with some pretty cool people, and you get to work on cartoons. So I think what I'm getting to is appreciate what it is first.
Yeah.
And probably bring that enthusiasm level, as we started talking about, and just sort of respect for the concept that this is like a blessing for the most part. And then if you get paid to do it on top of it, just keep that in mind. And then you're also part of this pretty important legacy, an American art form, things that are just kind of cool.
Yeah.
And if you can just every once in a while, no matter how busy you get, or if you are drawing something for the 150th time, or whatever the case may be, just realize that it's a fun job.
You're drawing cartoons.
You're drawing cartoons, so
exactly.
Just keep that in mind, and it makes everything just a little bit better, and better for those around you.
Absolutely. I think, it's kind of just enjoying the journey, knowing that at the end of the day, we could just look back and just say, wow, I got to do that. I got to live doing that. So that's awesome. Well, awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was very spontaneous. I was just at dinner. I was kind of doing the Norman Rockwell thing here. I'll just explain that real quick. Norman Rockwell was at dinner. He wanted to do this fireman painting with this firefighter with a cigar. If you guys have ever seen that, and the firefighter sort of cringing at it. He was always looking for the right face and the right person. And he was at a dinner, and he said, you're the guy that I want. And he took him to the studio when I was at dinner with Wade. I'm like, Wade, we got to have this conversation. So thanks, Wade, for coming on. This was awesome. And be sure to check out the Ground Zero Animation Expo that's coming in June. It's going to be a fantastic new animation expo, third year. And you'll meet a lot of creative people and a great way to connect. So thanks. Have a good week. All right.